Okay, and then in the part C of the assignment, what I want you to do is I want you to do an analysis of who you think, Berlin or McPherson, is more persuasive in their interpretation about the cause of emancipation. Now, I want to stress there's no right or wrong answer. I just want you to offer what who you think is more persuasive in about a 3 paragraph formal presentation. It might start, in my opinion, James McPherson offers a more persuasive interpretation for the causes of emancipation for these reasons. Or you can use the word I in this case. I argue that Ira Berlin offers a more interpretive interpretation of the causes of emancipation for the following reasons. And what I want you to do is I want you to give some examples from the readings, McPherson and Berlin, and to support your interpretation. Basically, you're interpreting Berlin and McPherson, and you're coming up with an interpretation on who you think is more persuasive. But it's a very short paper. And then in part D, what I want you to do is I want you to look at the footnotes for Berlin in particular, because Berlin is using the footnotes in his essay to argue specifically against McPherson. And this is something that footnotes can be used for. It's a way that historians can argue with each other without kind of clogging up their narrative. When you look at footnotes, we've talked about footnotes. It's for transparency, and for it's a way historians can kind of follow the paper trail to make sure that the scholarly work that they're reading is accurate, in the sense that they claim Abraham Lincoln said this, and you can go back and sure enough Abraham Lincoln said it. So we've talked about the transparency and the ability footnotes allow historians to go make sure that the claims that historians are making are true. And also, you might be just interested in the subject, and you're interested in where the historian got his or her information, and you just might want to go, okay, well, that's really interesting. I'm going to read that too. So it's not always like trying to catch somebody being wrong. It's just like, okay, what's the literature on this? What's the argument on this? This is very interesting. Footnotes can be a shortcut into defining kind of the scholarly consensus on an issue, and it can also be a great place to find primary evidence. Footnotes can be used as a shortcut in that sense. But in this particular case, Berlin is using footnotes, and I point out the exact footnotes in the assignment. He's using footnotes to argue specifically with McPherson. And uh, as I say, in the assignment, I point out the exact footnotes that I want you to look at. And I want you to look at these footnotes, and again, I want you to write about a 3 or so page formal paper, a 3 or 4 page, you probably just freaked out, 3 or 4 paragraph formal presentation where you discuss how Berlin uses footnotes to attack McPherson. Now, you don't have to support Berlin, you don't have to support McPherson. I don't care about that. I mean, we're going to talk about it in class, who you think is right, who you think is wrong, who you think is fair, who's unfair. But that's not the point of this assignment. The point of this assignment is to get you in the habit of looking at footnotes, because you can follow historical arguments in footnotes. Footnotes, you might think of footnotes as kind of a shadow book. It's kind of it undergirds the narrative. It's kind of a secondary book. I'm trying to think of it. I'm trying to think of the correct way to phrase it. It's the part of the book that it's not the narrative, but it's a secondary book. And in saying secondary, I'm not trying to denigrate it, because it's absolutely essential to the historical process. But it's maybe the way I should put it is it can be a secondary narrative, or it can be a parallel narrative. And when historians they can use footnotes to argue specifically with other historians, but they can also use footnotes to talk about all kinds of things, their process, to point out some issues that they think are important but not important to put enough to put in the historical narrative. So think of footnotes at times can be a secondary book, a parallel narrative. Now, as you'll see when you look at Berlin, some of the footnotes are just basic footnotes that give you the page numbers and the sites and all that. But also Berlin, this is a really interesting example of Berlin using footnotes to fight with McPherson. And I want you to look at that, and I want you to analyze how he uses footnote. What does he say? What are the arguments that he makes in his footnotes against McPherson? How does he use footnotes to critique McPherson? On the assignment, I'll show you how to cite a footnote. It's very easy. You just add footnote. So look for that.